Hi, everyone. Today on the podcast, we have Alexis, the founder of Voxalyze. Alexis, can you remind us what Voxalyze does?
Thanks, Elias. I'm happy to be on the show today. In short, Voxalyze, we are the analytics suite for audio content publishers. And practically, we do two things. One, we provide audio content publishers with a solution for what we call PVO, which stands for Podcast Visibility Optimization. It is how to optimize the visibility of a show within the platform. And very soon, we'll be launching an attribution solution, which will allow you to track the effectiveness of marketing campaigns happening off platform. We work with podcast publishers of any size, but mostly with the large ones such as radio or newspaper groups.
Awesome. So as we're nearing the end of 2022, what's your take on the state of podcast and digital audio in general?
It's interesting time. I would say challenging times. What we see is radio is suffering. We see the audience down for most of the radios. And what's happening is actually the shift from linear to on-demand. Same as happened in TV, in newspapers. It's a big shift. It's really challenging. And if you look at young people today, most of them, if you do them 101.3 FM, they don't have a tuner. For them, it's not that. The way they consume audio content, being music, podcasts, or narrative content, it's via streaming platform or via podcast. And that's the challenge for the radio and the digital audio in large. That has been that shift from linear to on-demand and digital.
All right, so younger demographics don't listen to the radio, they listen to audio content on platforms. How do you see the relationship between content publishers such as radio broadcasters and podcast platforms like Spotify and Apple Podcasts?
It's complicated. What you see is most large radio stations or groups are building their own streaming or podcast platform, putting all their content in one place. Live audio, replay audio, native podcast, and it makes sense. You control the user experience. You collect a lot of data. You can push your own recommendation for another show that you own. You can put ads. You control revenue, you control everything. It makes a lot of sense. The challenge, though, it's hard to convince users to install yet another app, sometime where you need to log in, verify your email to have access to content. It's friction for the users, which is not happening when users consume that very same content on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. So the relationship is very challenging. And I like to say it's a frenemy relationship.
Okay. Do you mind building up on this, telling us a bit more what you mean by frenemies?
Yeah. Frenemies is a term that means both friends and enemy. Let's say radio publishers or radios on one side, audio content publishers and platforms on the other side. They're friends. The radio need the platform, and I'll take Spotify as an example, to get their content heard. I mean, those platforms have built the app. They have acquired users, and sometimes they paid for that. And they offer for free massive reach to someone producing content. And that's the friend part. On the other side, you could also see them as enemy. I heard from a large public broadcaster recently, a week or so ago. They were really pissed at Spotify and Apple Podcasts in the sense that, hey, we invest a lot of money creating quality content. Those guys get our content for free and they make money on top of it via ads that they run, via paid subscription to have access to their platform. And it's that mix of, hey, we need you, but we're also afraid that you make money on our content and you can cut us anytime. And that's a bit that sort of friend and enemy relationship at the same time, which is what I call frenemy relationship.
Okay, so it's a fine line that historic radio broadcasters are walking there. They need to find the right balance.
Exactly.
How do you see the evolution of platforms? We've seen, historically, Apple has dominated with Apple Podcast, and Spotify has started to get itself a big portion of the pie. And now we see other actors moving in, YouTube, TikTok. How do you see that?
It's moving grounds. We're not over yet with the platform wars. And what we're seeing, it's moving from a duopoly, which was the platforms were dominated by Apple Podcasts on one hand and Spotify and the others. And it's moving from duopoly to oligopoly. YouTube is coming up and very aggressive in terms of podcasts. I could envision clearly YouTube and Google Podcasts merging at some point of time. I mean, they're both Google product. Twitter, whatever the shit show at the moment with Elon Musk, they had a podcast plan or strategy at some point of time. Will it come back? Let's see. Samsung Podcast doing a lot of things. TikTok is moving into podcasts. Netflix seems to be recruiting people for their podcast operations. So the platforms are here. There'll be more and more. It's going to be, therefore, more and more important for podcasters to have a clear platform strategy. where do I go? Do I go everywhere? Where do I go? Or do I get there? Okay, I'm getting distributed. Now, what can I do to be visible, to take advantage of the platform? And that's what we see a lot of the traditional big radio station coming to us with those prime asking like, hey, we know we need to be on platform. We don't have data. We don't know what to do. Can you help us with your tools to really optimize our platform strategy?
Interesting. So we started talking about distribution a bit. What are other challenges and opportunities for podcasters going into 2023?
I see three main challenges: creation, distribution, monetization, the three main pillars of podcast business. If I take the first one in terms of creation or production, quality is really a thing. The day where you would record on a lot of echo, low quality things, people want better quality. People want diversity as well. They want to hear something new. If it's to hear the same type of content that they can find in a newspaper, on videos, on TV, they want something fresh. They want something new, and they want quality content, but they want innovation. And the question I really ask some of our clients is like, yes, you're having a true crime show like every other radio station, every large podcast you do. Does the market need yet another true crime show, or could we innovate in terms of content creation and content diversity? And that's really on the creative side of the content creators, content publishers, to scratch ahead and come up with really new and interesting concepts.
And the last one was monetization, you said?
I know it's creation, distribution, and then monetization. So if we go to distribution, the challenge for publishing house is really you need to have a platform strategy. What's your strategy, as I mentioned, in platform? But more and more, what's the strategy of platform? I invested a lot of money, a lot of time producing that great content. How do I advertise it? Should I go and do social media campaigns? Or do I measure the effectiveness of those? I mean, today it's the day where you would produce a great piece of content, push it into the platform, sit back, relax, and hope that all the listener will find you by word of mouth, or you would be picked by hand of God and be visible in the platform. That's not happening anymore. When you launch a podcast, you need to have a clear distribution strategy in place, and you need to invest a little bit of money. Social media, for example, it could be on web ads, wherever it's relevant for your content and your audience, to kick off the audience growth.
Okay, so there's a clear trend of podcasters having to professionalize to have a chance to stand out, basically.
Exactly. I like to say, I know I'm going to sound very old, but when the App Store came out in the late 2000, you'll be the first one out there. People will find you because there were hardly any apps. No, there are millions of apps. And if you talk to all the people into the app world, none of them will come up with a strategy like, I build my app, I press the submit button, and that's it. No, they all have a strategy of, how do I acquire users? How do I drive traffic to my app? How do I retain my users? And today, that's what the podcast publishers, the audio content publishers are realizing. They also need a strategy to, how do I acquire users? Just pushing it into the platform is not enough.
So last one you said was monetization. It's interesting because I have a app marketing, web marketing background where you have like an endless possibilities for targeting, almost too much, to the extent that there was a bit of a consumer pushback from our privacy. But from where I'm standing, it seems like podcast ads are still in their infancy, basically. It's not as advanced and it's complex at the same time.
And you're spot on. To take a shortcut or to summarize that, today, two ways to monetize content for podcast publishers. You can try subscription, but it's complex. You need to have a name. You need to have a certain amount of listeners yet. And it's still early days. I mean, Apple is trying, Spotify has been following, but literally if you want to buy a subscription on Spotify, today it's a mess. And users already have a lot of subscription. I've recently heard the term subscription fatigue, like you have screen fatigue. Subscription is one way, but it's still very, very early days and it's complex. So the other solution is, well, ads. But here it's also pretty early. Podcasts are growing very fast, but it's still niche. It's still early. That will change, but as more and more people listen to podcasts, but for an advertiser to find you, it's not as big as a Super Bowl ads. You don't get the same reach. So it's a lot more effort. And as you pointed out, data is missing. An advertiser on the web, on mobile, will want to target by geography, by age, by whatever social category they want to dice the information. And the challenge with podcasts is you don't really know who's listening. And that makes it hard for advertisers to really target. But nevertheless, ads dominate. And there is that lack of information. What do advertisers do? Blockbuster effect. I recently read that 80% of revenues are actually in ads revenues are generated by less than 20% of the podcast. And it's really, if you manage to get your head above water and be visible to the advertisers and you're somewhere in the content niche that they're looking for, they all come to you. And then I have a plenty of examples of people making a lot of money, but you need to get there. And you also need to start anticipating the next steps.
Okay, so there's a power law at play here with the short tail of publishers making most of the revenue.
Yeah, like in every content creation industry, music, cinema.
To wrap it up, what are your predictions for 2023?
The first thing I see or envision, or my best guess for 2023 would be the industry will professionalize itself. The time of the tourists are gone. You saw a lot of them during COVID. I buy a microphone or not. I record a podcast. I talk with some friends. I do a few interviews. I push that up, make a bit of money. That time is over. People have realized that it's a sales business. To produce quality content, it's investment of money and time and a lot of efforts. So I see the tourists slowly leaving the industry really for professionals. The other thing I foresee is monetization will improve. The IAB, so the International Advertising Bureau, forecasts the growth in terms of dollars spent in the United States to keep in podcasts, to keep growing at a fantastic pace. So monetization is going to improve, which is good news for publishers. And their strategy will become clearer for the publishers, like especially with regard to distribution. Do they push their own content? Do they push other content? Do they push part of the content on the platform, the rest on their own platform? It's becoming clear. And we start to sense it with all the discussions we have with our clients.
All right. Where can our listeners find you, find Voxalyze?
To find Voxalyze, so voxalyze.com, voxalyze.com. And they can find me at Alexis U in with English pronunciation on LinkedIn and Twitter. And if they have any questions, then feel free to reach out and I'll be happy to help them.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thanks a lot.